I'm speaking with Emmy and Grammy-nominated composer Ramin Djawadi, who is behind the music of Game of Thrones, Person of Interest, recently scored Medal of Honor Warfighter, as well as the film Red Dawn. Thanks so much for talking with us today, Ramin.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I guess we talked a while ago, so we have all I have your backstory and everything. So I guess we'll just dive right into Game of Thrones.
hmm
When you first started the series, it's going into season 3 now, but how did you determine what that fictional world would sound like, and how did you find the soundscape for that universe?
Um, well, the producers were obviously a big part of it. They had such a great vision for what they wanted in the show, and obviously with being fantasy, semi-period, whatever you want to call it, they had
Hmm.
certain ideas of things that they didn't want to do. So that definitely helped me already in eliminating some things. For example, they said we don't really want flutes or like the solo vocal, like things that are very common in that genre, like with Lord of the Rings or with Gladiator, things that have been very successfully done. So they said we want to try to find our own sound for this. So that what could that be? So um, one of the big instruments turned out to be actually the solo cello that has been obviously all over the show, including the main title.
Yeah.
So it was things like that, just trying to find our own sounds, some minor organic electronic kind of things and percussive elements, and it was definitely a challenge. And
Yeah.
on top of this, obviously, there's so many characters and plots and this and that, so to make find a good structure for that it's not too confusing was quite a challenge, but so much fun.
Right. I mean, you say the other. It's a very. It's not. I don't want to say a dense show, but it's just very intricate and very involving, and it's a lot of dialogue. It's not a super actiony show. Is that a
hmm
challenge for a composer to make sense of all that material and translate that musically?
Well, definitely. I mean, the shows. It's very hard to spot. We always um, realize when we spot the episode that it's so tricky to even find spots, especially in the earlier episodes, because the way I look at this show, that it's basically it's 10 episodes, but it's like a 10-hour movie. So there is,
Hmm.
you have the intro of it all, and then it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So naturally, uh, there's less music in the beginning, and then it really builds up, and then usually by episode 8, 9, and 10, then it's pretty packed with music. But in the beginning, it's very tough, and yeah, like you said, there is so much dialogue in there. Many times it doesn't need any music, or sometimes we spot music and then I write something and we review it and then we watch it and go like, maybe we should just take it out. So that has happened definitely several times where we just ended up muting it. Or if you stay in with music, you obviously have to be very aware of not getting in the way of dialogue, but still helping tell the story.
Right.
So it's quite a challenge.
And you said you approach it like a 10-hour movie. And I've talked to a couple of composers who worked on miniseries and kind of HBO series. Jeff Zanelli, for one, talked about Pacific. And I asked him, do you work on kind of one episode at a time, or do you try to get a whole kind of arc for the entire season in perspective first before you attempt writing for a season?
Well, it kind of depends on the what state they're in post production. So in the let me think back. I think in the first season, I saw the first two episodes and started working based on what I saw there, and then obviously based on conversations with what my producers were telling me where we were heading and everything. And then in season two, I actually had quite a quite a few episodes available to me there where I really saw what's going on and where we're heading, and so I could plan quite well. Actually,
Hmm.
uh, it was really great because I could see, okay, in episode 6 there's this big event, and I better set this up in episode 1 with, even if you just get a 30-second snippet of it, but it will become this big piece. So that was great.
Right, right. And I think that one of the most memorable things I think of Game of Thrones when I tune in every Sunday night is the opening title, the main theme, and you've worked on many TV shows like Prison Break and Person of Interest, and you've been nominated twice for Best Theme for Emmys. How important is a main theme for a television show?
Well, I always like to say actually that the main title is supposed to get you from wherever you are in the house at the moment, is it in the kitchen or in the hallway or something, if you hear that main title on TV, I want people to go, oh, my show is on. I gotta go in the living room and sit down and watch it. So I think it's supposed to really be the essence of a show and the key opponent that really tells you this is my favorite show and I'm getting ready to enjoy this now.
And do you there? I mean, there's different variations of. I mean, there's a show like Lost where the main theme is 8 seconds long. Is there a? Do you have a preference for making a big kind of elaborate opening title, or do you prefer to keep it short? Does it depend on the show?
No, definitely depends on the show, and I think in with your example on Lost, I mean it's a great example of how something can be done in a different approach without having a minute and a half of a long theme or anything, and even that you can argue that you hear this piece and you will say, oh, Lost is on, I got to go in. So whatever it is that draws your attention, I think is key. So it doesn't matter on the length. Sure, I mean, as a composer, do I prefer a longer piece? Absolutely, so I can get a couple more notes in, that's for sure. So, and then in the case of Game of Thrones, it was wonderful. I had this great visual, obviously, to work with, and they showed me an early stage, and I was just blown away of the graphics that they were working on, and that got me so inspired to write this piece.
And throughout the show, I've noticed that you've referenced that melody a little bit, and I know composers sometimes they reference the main theme into the body of the score, and in some cases they completely ignore it. It's its own separate entity. What is your take? How does the title theme fit into the main body of the score throughout the show's run?
Yeah, I think it's. I like to treat it as kind of a global theme, because it is the intro to the show, and it's a global theme to the show. So I think it's a very good tool to use in certain moments. Actually, for example, to jump to Prison Break, the entire first season, we did not use the main title theme until the very, very end of the last episode when they broke out, and then we said, you know what, this is a special moment. Let's use the main theme. And actually similar in Game of Thrones as well, where the main title rarely gets used, but then as the show progresses, I start using it, and I even weave it into different characters, or just use the submotif with some of the characters' theme, but the submotif of the main title is in there, and usually around episode 9 or 10, that's when it starts showing up. So we always kind of keep it as a special treat.
I know when I hear it come up, I'm like, yes.
Excellent.
And you're working now. You're doing both a cable show and a network show with Person of Interest. What are the main differences between the two in terms of kind of workload and scheduling?
Well, I want to say that maybe Game of Thrones, I probably have a little bit more time. It's not, even though it airs weekly, the way they have their schedule set up is that I actually have, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks to do an episode, sometimes even a bit more, sometimes less, but it definitely varies a bit more, and that's just because the way they have their post-production set up, which is they actually shoot all the episodes first. So when we start working, they already have all 10 episodes pretty much in the cans, minus special effects, obviously, and things like that. But so there is, like I said earlier, there's more episodes available to watch, and that, whereas in Person of Interest, I think they're only a couple of episodes ahead of me. So I think when I work on episode 5, I think they might be shooting 9, I believe. I don't know, but so they're not that much ahead. So that's pretty tight, and that's literally on a weekly basis.
And how much music do you think is per episode of a show like Person of Interest? Is it more or less than something like Game of Thrones?
It varies. I'm trying to think. I think Person of Interest I think it can have anywhere between 25 and sometimes up to 35 minutes. Many times there's a song at the end, but lately even we haven't had that, so then it can definitely get up to 35. And in Game of Thrones, I think some of the early episodes, we even had some episodes where there was maybe 20 minutes of music in an episode, and that's even an hour show. That's not only 45 minutes with commercial, that's a full hour show with no breaks.
Right, yeah.
So that feels really light, but again, like we discussed earlier, I think because of the dialogue and the interesting plot, it's actually important to sometimes stay away with music, and then when you bring it in, it really means something.
And
Um,
oh, sorry, but does your process change at all for a network or cable? Because network show you have commercial breaks and you have kind of like act, parts as the commercials go through versus Game of Thrones, which kind of just goes nonstop. Does that change your approach and your procedures at all a little bit?
Not really. I mean, obviously the act outs is something you have to always set up and create a build towards the commercials. But other than that, I treat all the projects the same with the themes and the character themes and plot themes. And the great thing about Person of Interest is that you have, even though it is a weekly episode, you have these great throughputs with those characters where they give you just a little bit more every episode, so you have that throughput that you want to find out more about them. So you can really, with the music, can just keep that going as well. So it's great.
Mhm. And you also got to jump in now to a little bit of a Medal of Honor, touch on that a little bit. How was it like to kind of return to that world? You created the Sonic universe for that, kind of with the reboot in 2010, I think that came out. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how was it like returning? Did you try to, is it continue that soundscape or restart from the beginning?
No, definitely it wasn't a restart. I mean, I think it's a good mix. It was first of all, it was great to work with EA again and the guys, because it's such a great team. And what was nice was that on the first one, yeah, we kind of set up the soundscape and the themes. So then on this one, we decided to create a mix, meaning that sometimes we decided to fall back on the old themes, but then the new plot actually naturally allowed me to. There was room for new themes, so it was nice to develop that even further, and then also use some of the old themes and create new arrangements for them. And I think overall the Warfighter is a bit darker than the first one, so there was a lot of dark emotion in there and dark things. So it kind of naturally went into slightly different direction, but overall it's definitely the same vibe as the first one.
And kind of like looking over everything kind of as a whole, as a storyteller, which your music I love so much. I've been listening to it for a very long time. So, growing up and it helps me because I'm not a musician. But as a writer, screenplay, it helps me write in that sense. But what gets your creative juices flowing? Music is kind of my creative thing, but for a musician, looking at is it the plot, the setting, the characters? I know it's a mix of everything, but where do you really start to build your music around?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of everything, because I get influence even from when I get a script. I sit there and actually when I read a script, it usually takes me a little longer, just because as I read it, music comes to my head and I try to imagine, okay, how could this scene be? Well, what could we do here? So that's usually always the start, or even just a conversation with a producer when they say, oh, we should do this or this, and then already that can be very inspiring. But then actually another big thing for me is the actual visual. For some reason I'm very visual, so when I see something, even the color of the picture can influence me immensely. For example, on Safe House, the director had done an amazing job with how he had shot the film and how he had the characters act and everything. And when I saw the actual film, I was so inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it had to do with color. So for some reason, I see notes in color. So maybe that's why that's a relationship to me there.
I agree. When I hear certain music, a lot of colors come through in terms of, I don't know, just when I'm listening to it, I'm like, it kind of matches the cinematography and everything like that. So I understand that completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's a hard thing to describe. I always talk to my wife about it, and she always asks me, like, how do you hear these notes or these melodies? And I think, I don't know. It's the colors that even it might influence me to write it in a certain key. And so that's just what it does to me.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to wrap up, last time we spoke, I asked you if you could score any film ever made with no disrespect to the original composer, which film would you choose? And you said Magnificent Seven. Is that still your is that you still see your same answer, or would you like to change it?
You know what? Actually, okay. How about this? It is still the same answer, but let's rechange it maybe to just set it clear for the record, because it's, if I were to rescore it, I know for a fact that I can't make it better. So maybe
Of
just
course,
because
yeah.
it's absolutely my favorite film, so maybe if I was just allowed to re-record it or something so that it says music by Elmer Bernstein and re-recorded by Marine, or something that I'm allowed to be a part of it, because that film is the reason why I went into film music. And actually I'll never forget my dad, because I loved Westerns so much. He used to tape them for me at night when he would come home and they would be on TV. He would tape them. And one day he said, last night the film was on and I taped it for you, but I only caught the end of it. So it turned out this was Magnificent Seven, and it was only the last 40 minutes. And this was back in the day with VHS tapes and everything. And so somehow the tape recorder had screwed up, so it was only in black and white. But I loved it so much, and I watched it every day. So that movie has a very, very special place in my heart. And the music too, obviously. I mean, that really triggered for me to do what I do now.
Spaghetti Westerns are my favorite. I love Once Upon a Time in the West, I think, is my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great film.
And, I know, and I can't wait for, next year Hans is working on Lone Ranger, so I can't wait for that.
I'm sure it's going to be great, yeah. That's going to be great, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ramin. I know you're very busy, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk, and it was a great pleasure and honor to talk to you again.
No, thanks so much. Yeah, it was great to talk to you, and again, thanks for having me.